Greetings upon greetings upon greetings. In other words, welcome to another week of Here to Help You. I am your host, Dave Rankin. As you can tell, I'm by myself today. Normally, of course, I have the lovely and wonderful, multifaceted Simone Jennifer Smith, but she's away on assignment. She'll definitely be back for Friday's show and in the now. So, guess who has to hold on the fort today for her? That's right. That's right. Before the show started, of course, I'm always the co-host. So, I have somebody joining me. All right. Before the show, engineer Anisha and I were just running a couple jokes saying that, probably in the mid show that you're probably going to see me like walk out because it's just going to be way too much for me to handle. You know what I mean? It really sucked for my brand if I did, right? We have an interesting show today. As you can tell by the caption, we are speaking about Neely Fuller Jr. and the 10 basic stops. Now, the 10 basic stops are outlined in his book, The United Independent Compensatory Code, Conduct, and as well as Theory. It's just a working theory. However, though, we will get a chance to go into this a little bit more by means, of course, I showed the book. However, though, we'll definitely get a picture of the actual book and his other works later on in the show. But before we get into the material, I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. First and foremost, I want to send a special thank you to everybody over at the Back Speculative Arts Movement this past weekend for a wonderful, wonderful event. I had fun. I'm seeing everybody dressed up in cosplay. I'm watching the panel, of course, dive into, of course, Afrofuturism and as well as its role in today's society and how it will go ahead and help us towards, striving for a Pan-African nation as well. So we definitely want to go ahead and thank everybody over there from Cordell, Q, to Stolen from Africa, Black Sun Comics, and everybody else who had a chance to participate in this weekend's event. By means, we thank you very much for doing so. Please check out the website, our website here, Toronto Caribbean, Facebook, the whole nine. We will have pictures. Simone's going to be writing a wonderful article for the event as well, explaining, of course, how much fun we had and of course, outlining its importance. Next, a little bit somber, our community, our Toronto hip hop community has lost. I'm gonna label him as a pioneer from my neighborhood. Howard Swift LaRock Nicholson. He passed at an early age of 47. due to complications of cancer. For those who know a little bit about surrounding hip hop, more importantly, Rexdale hip hop, he was a producer, Ghetto Concept with Quadro, Infinite, Dolo, you name it. Two-time Juno Award winners. He was instrumental, of course, in Certified, which was one of their joints back in the early '90s, and just to say that we've lost him at a very early age. His influence would definitely carry on, of course, as Quadron as well as Infinite and Dolo continue on with their hip hop careers. Our condolences go out to all his friends, his family, everyone who simply came across this brother. He was a wonderful spirit, a wonderful brother, and more importantly, he's going to be sorely missed. Also, on a grander scheme of things, we've lost a stalwart in our community as well, Mr. Bromley Armstrong. For those who don't know who Mr. Armstrong is, he's been a champion for race relations in our community for quite a long time. He died, I believe the passing was this past weekend. I believe I read a few articles this weekend in the Star. Star's got a pretty good articles on him. We have reached out to the UARR, the organization that Mr. Armstrong was part of, for a comment, as well as for them to go ahead and share their experiences. Hopefully they'll go ahead and get back to us, and we can get a chance to go ahead and get a chance to have them in the studio, so that way they can go ahead and share their experiences with Mr. Armstrong in person. Now, let's move on. So, Neely Fuller Jr. Actually, could we throw up the first picture of the book? Yeah, let's do the book first, and we can go to the picture of him afterwards. Yes, the United Independent Compensatory Code, System, and Concept. Let me just go into this a little bit in regards to the background, and then we can go into Mr. Fuller himself. So, this book basically is a term that means which expressed in practice the sum total of everything that is thought, said, or done by one individual who is a victim of racism, and that will be effective in helping eliminate white supremacy, racism, and or in helping to make up the lack of justice or correctness in any one or more areas of activity, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Now, simply what this means is this. For us who have been subject to racism, and for those who definitely would no longer see its ugly head reared, there are things that we need to go ahead and do as a community at large. And maybe picking up this book and understanding this gentleman is one of these things, right? He's definitely a champion for the cause. Mr. Fuller himself, he's an interesting fellow once you get a chance to hear him speak, and we will go ahead and play a couple clips for you later on so you get a chance to go ahead and see the gentleman speak as well. But it's interesting in regards to how this man can go ahead and actually come up with the foresight since the 50s to write about, of course, racism, right? And continuing the championing of this cause, and inspired so many others afterwards, one being Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, which we'll play a clip of her later on as well. But let's show a clip of Mr. Fuller.
Have broken out because of this. But those who believe in the system of white supremacy are far more powerful and smarter than those who don't.
I noticed on the back of your book there's a statement that says if you don't understand racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything you understand will serve to confuse you. What do you mean by it?
Right. If you don't understand what white supremacy is and how it works, everything else that you understand will confuse you, because that is the dominant motivating force among the people of the known universe, as it is today in all of the 9 areas of activity. And it means that the white people who have decided to take part in this form of royalism, meaning racism, white supremacy, want people to fall in line behind it, and have actually done so. Now those who don't, the white people who don't, they run into great difficulty. The non-white people, whether they are in direct contact with white people or not, they fall under the system, because the system takes in everything that people do, every minute of every day, every place in the known universe. And if you don't understand this system, you won't understand anything else that's going on.
Is there?
That is Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. That's I believe the show is Poetry Like Me. Danny Queen is the host. I'm not sure how far back in time where that interview may have taken place, but it's still the information is still relevant to this day. Mr. Fuller, who's the Vietnam veteran, and during the 50s, he began his research on racism and white supremacy. It wasn't until the 60s where he met Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, and they would continue a bond which pretty much lasted right up until her untimely passing a few years ago. She also referred to him in the ISIS Papers, which was an excellent book. By means, those who have not picked it up, please go ahead and do so. I have my copy, and it's autographed, and it's sitting at home on my shelf. I got pictures with her too. Definitely. Wonderful, wonderful woman. So, how much time we got? 35 seconds. I don't want to get into a whole lot before, of course, the commercial break. However, though, when we come back after the break, we'll be diving into the 10 basic stops that every victim of white supremacy should practice in speech and in action. See you then.
Think you have what it takes to bring value to the community? The TCN TV network is expanding and now accepting TV show proposals. Here's an opportunity to build celebrity status and become part of an elite group of community advocates that are focused on building, strengthening, and empowering our community in a positive way. Are you interested in embarking on a new adventure? TCN TV is searching for people interested in opportunities to change the conversation and pave an unforgettable legacy. If you feel you have something of value to offer, send a written show proposal to shows@mytcntv.com.
Are you retiring smart? Make your home's equity work for you. With your home's equity and our 30 years of experience, the Retire Smart Properties team can help you achieve the quality of life you've always wanted. Our services are 360 degrees. We'll give you advice, take care of staging and selling, and help you find the perfect home and community to transition to. It's time to enjoy the retirement lifestyle you deserve. Visit our website today to learn how you can use your home to retire comfortably. The Retire Smart Properties team, powered by RE/MAX West.
Greetings, and welcome back to another episode of Here to Help You. I am your host, Dave Rankin. Today's show, we are talking all things Neely Fuller Jr. and the 10 basic stops that every victim of white supremacy racism should practice in speech and in action. Now, for those who haven't heard of the book, once again, the United Independent Compensatory Code/System /concept. Now, the thought process behind the book, once again, was to assist others in eliminating racism, or white supremacy, that is, right? And I like this section which we pulled out today, which we're going to go ahead and express to y'all. And the reason being is this. They're very clear, they're very concise, right? However, though, especially in today's society, one's going to always go ahead and beg the question to ask, right? Is that if the 10 basic stops are practical in today's society, and more importantly, can we as a society, right, truly eliminate racism? With that being said, let's get into today's material. So, let's give you a few working definitions, first and foremost. Number one, racism, Neely Fuller describes this as a total system covering 9 areas of activity. These 9 areas, once again, are economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. War, or counter-war, as he calls it. As you can tell, and with each subject, pretty much everything is intertwined, and by means, of course, with racism and white supremacy being such a monster in our society, they definitely got their tentacles in so many areas of known activity. Justice, as a working definition, Neely Fuller describes justice as a balance between people, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person who needs help the most gets the most help. Very simple definition. However, of course, in practice, maybe not. The 10 basic stops. So the summary of the basic stops. Well, this was to go ahead and derive to in order to help eliminate racism and to produce justice for all victims of racism. Should in all their relationships with each other think, speak, and act in support of the following 3-word suggestion. Minimize the conflict. Now, it's an interesting point, especially now considering that when one needs to go ahead and minimize the conflict, we're thinking about drawing back those emotional habits that we normally fall into, especially when we face ourselves with a conflicted situation, right? And begin to use logic. Easier said than done, right? But hopefully these 10 stops will go ahead and assist us. These are the 10 basic stops that we will go through by means time permitting. Hopefully we'll get through all of them. If not, at least we'll get a working definition for all of them. Number 1, stop snitching. Number 2, stop name calling. Number 3, stop cursing. Number 4, stop gossiping. Number 5, stop being discourteous. Number 6, stop stealing. Number 7, stop robbing. Number 8, stop fighting. Number 9, stop killing. And the 10th, stop squabbling among yourselves and asking racist or white supremacy to settle it. Interesting, I know. Let's get into them all. The first one, stop snitching. So here's his definition of snitching. To willfully and deliberately volunteer information about a person or persons with specific intention of gaining direct or indirect personal favors and or praise from racists. So this does not mean if you've been violated with respect to now somebody, of course, wanting to inflict harm on you. And he says that later on as well. This does not mean speaking to protect yourself from false accusations or from unjust acts. So for instance, if somebody does inflict violence upon you, should you not go ahead and, report this to the authorities, right? There's always an argument there, depending, of course, which side of the tracks he may come from. But at the same time, his working definition does go out to state that snitching does mean to say something to get ahead of someone else by taking unjust advantage of his or her lack of correct judgment. So it's an important fact that definitely, we as a people need to go ahead and begin looking at these working definitions just a little bit differently so that we can continue to eliminate racism. Next, stop name calling. Name calling, as he defines it, is to call a person by any other name that person chooses to be called and or chooses to call him or herself. So you can imagine now, of course, if we now go ahead and call somebody a name, especially a name that they don't want to be called, how that person may go ahead and feel or act, right? Neely Fuller continues to state here that name calling, although it is a simple act, but it is a major act which promotes serious conflict between one another. To avoid name calling a person, it is better to practice describing what that person does or doing or says or saying. So for instance, I don't want to be calling somebody an asshole, right, as a name, as opposed to describing what they were doing, which is pretty much asshole-like, right? It sounds mundane, but at the same time, if we begin now to go ahead and use these terms, right, and use this practice in our everyday speech and everyday action, just maybe we got a shot, of course, of having better conversation and, once again, minimizing the conflict. Stop name calling. Neely Fuller continues on to say that it is also very important to know and understand what not to do when a person calls you a name. And this is very important here. Number 1, do not say anything. Number 2, do not fight. And also number 3, do not kill. Hold on, let me go ahead and do some branding here real quick. Sorry, let me go ahead this side. Now, I wonder if we can go ahead and let's go back into our genetic memory banks here, right, and talk about those brothers and sisters who were called nigger during the 60s and 70s during the Black Power or Black Pride movements, right? And the thought process of when being antagonized by the enemy, by white supremacists, by racists, and having to endure this pain, and wanting to go ahead and fight back, but understanding for the greater good that if we don't practice or exercise some sort of restraint, when does this stop? It's an interesting point, definitely. I don't know. I personally don't know what type of restraint, or if I would have any restraint if someone's going to go ahead and antagonize myself, in that manner. And by means, I can understand why there are a lot of us who simply get upset when especially being called nigger by somebody of another culture, right? I'm sure we've seen all the YouTube clips. I've watched one the other day where simply on the bus, a man literally beat up this white guy on the bus. But mind you, of course, he showed a lot of restraint, and then at the end, he just simply lost it. I can understand why. I mean, it's a hard thing to do, definitely. But once again, if we are to go ahead and minimize the conflict and eliminate racism, these are some of the steps that we need to go ahead and take as a whole. Next, stop cursing. Some of us have a hard time doing this, and I'm just thinking of some situations back the other day, which by means, of course, happened as well. Stop cursing. The working definition here is to use profanity toward them in a manner that is likely to be thought of as insulting or demeaning. This often results in the promotion of hostility, rightfully so, right? This hostility promoted oftentimes serves no constructive purposes. Excuse me. We can understand that, because could you imagine now getting an argument with your brethren, your idrin, your girl, your wife, your spouse, your side thing, whatever, right? And all of a sudden, all you hear is that curse word. Everything else goes out the window, except that curse word. And we become fixated, of course, upon that curse word. And everything else goes out the window. So in order for us to go ahead and have better conversations, right, and be looked upon as having, of course, this rich human experience, we have to begin to go ahead and choose our words carefully. And, and that's not just to go back to state that, like, it is easy to get caught up in the emotional side of things. But the ideal here in this book is to go ahead and eliminate racism, right? And who else is better to do it than who understands it? Next, stop gossiping. I like this one here. So he gives his definition of gossiping as to say something about that person to someone other than that person that you would not be willing to say directly to that person. Case in point, right? A very simple definition here. I mean, if you're willing to go out and talk about somebody else behind their back and not say those same things to that person, you're just adding to the problem or not to the solution. By means, once again, the idea is to go ahead and have better conversations, right? To be treated better, fairly as humans, and more importantly, to have this experience, in this physical shell that we call the human body, right? And gossiping definitely does not help us. It definitely assists in creating more problems than solutions. Neely Fuller continues on to state that it does promote injustice, and oftentimes it leads to hostility, which in turn often leads to snitching, name-calling, cursing, fighting, and or killing. I'm sure we can, relate back to high school where somebody said something about you, and of course you had to go ahead and defend that with your honor, right? And by means, what happened? The name-calling started happening, the cursing, and by means, of course, and even from, my lovely side of the tracks, definitely some throwdowns, some fisticuffs happen, that's for sure. We've got about a minute left before we go into commercials. Let's do this. Neely Fuller, he's written 2 books. The first one, which we're elaborating from or elucidating from, of course, the United and Independent Compensatory Code. There's a second book that he has written called The Word Guide. Yes, there it is. Now, I personally don't own it, only because the publishers do not ship to Canada. Which sucks, because, and one side of the thought process is that you may have this thought process where, listen, like, we don't experience the same issues that you guys may be experiencing over there as well. So we ask you, as the man would say in the corner, fly the gate, allow these materials to be shipped over here to Canada. We need them as well so we can go ahead and teach our own, build our own, you know what? And of course, by means, build better, stronger nations. We got 15 seconds left. By means, let's go to the second Neely Fuller video for the outro. We'll be back after the break. Hope you're enjoying us. Here to help you.
What is a tragic arrangement? All the 5 basic words to describe what needs to be done.
Well, when you put it in the frame of reference, everyone, when they talk about racism and white supremacy, should always start by saying that the focus, the objective should be replace white supremacy with justice. Those are the 5 basic words. And you start your frame of reference from that. The words are very important because when people talk about racism, they tend to get away from the basic focus. If you keep those 5 words in mind, replace white supremacy with justice, then you can keep focus. In many of these discussions on the matter, people tend to get into everything from feminism to words that don't have precise definitions.
And everything else. They go off on a tangent.
Yes, right.
Yeah, but this kind of locks it in.
Right. Bigotry, discrimination, sexism, a multitude of isms. Biracialism, whatever that means, multiculturalism.
Whatever that means.
Yes. And so you get into a myriad of words that don't apply to the focus of what you're talking about. So therefore, that is the basic frame of reference that you should always focus on. That should be used by all people who are talking about the problem as it is.
Greetings and welcome back to Here to Help You. Once again, I am your host, Dave Rankin, filling in. I got the show by myself today. My queen, she's not here today. She's away on assignment. She will be back for Friday's show in the now. So once again, I might have to hold on the thing, you see me? So if you're just tuning in, we are talking Neely Fuller Jr. and his book, The United Compensatory Code, Conduct, and it's a long one, I know, Concept. Excuse me. So, and we're taking an excerpt from this book here called The 10 Basic Stops That Every Victim of White Supremacy should practice in speech and in action. We've gone through the first 4, and I'll recap them for you. Number 1, stop snitching. I'm pretty sure that is self-explanatory at this point. However, though, just to revert back to it, snitching does not refer to if you need to defend yourself against unjust acts, which also means is that if somebody has inflicted harm on you, you have every right to go ahead and report this to the authorities. Number 2, stop name calling. Of course, there's no purpose whatsoever when we need to go ahead and have better conversations and once again to eliminate racism with justice. Number 3, stop cursing. as mentioned before, the example, of course, sometimes we get into that argument and we go ahead and use the profane language. By means, sometimes we have the tendency to just fixate on the language said or used, that is, opposed to, of course, the message around it. Rightfully so, by means. And number 4, stop gossiping, which, of course, needs no further elucidation whatsoever. Let's continue on here. Number 5 on the list, stop being discourteous. Now, I like this definition because it's clear and it's concise, and by means, let's step right into it. It is to say or do something that shows a lack of consideration for what a person is saying or doing. Also, to not allow a person to reveal and or to explain his or her intentions. So you can imagine now, of course, where you get in that conversation and you now become a little bit more emotional. And by means, the other person cannot get a word in, or simply you can't get a word in to what you need to say. It doesn't help. Trust me, it doesn't help. I've been on both ends of the stick, and by means, neither one of them were by means prosperous, and we didn't have a favorable outcome, to say the least. But as Neely Fuller said prior to the end of the last segment, 5 words we now have to become fixated with is to replace racism with justice. And once again, justice is simply making sure that everybody is treated fairly and that those who need the help the most receive the help. Let's continue. Number 6, stop stealing. To steal from any person for any reason is to promote injustice. I like this. Even to steal to survive or as a survival tactic is also to promote injustice. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there right now who probably say, listen, if I'm hungry, why? I'm just going to have to take something so that way I don't go hungry. But it doesn't help. It's still in the wrong. And by means, of course, you wouldn't want somebody to do it to you as well. So we can understand why Neely Fuller has went ahead and stated this here in his top 10. Next, he continues on to saying here, when stealing helps to maintain, expand, or refine the practice of white supremacy, it is not generally considered to be stealing. It is oftentimes called progress. Now, this is an interesting thought, especially when we have major corporations, governments who practice basically stealing, right? They can call it whatever they want. They can call it a restructuring of funds. They can call it to legal loopholes where they felt they can go ahead and siphon funds in different directions, or materials, or produce by means. But once again, if it helps to maintain, expand, and or refine white supremacy, they will not consider it to be stealing. But the rest of the world knows exactly what it is for what it is. And that is, of course, not progress. It's quite interesting for the fact that these people who do engage in this thought or the practice, how far and how at length they would go ahead and engage. And just to quote a little bit more from the book, the system of white supremacy functions in such a manner that non-white people are not only to expected to steal, but also encouraged to steal. They are trained, bribed, and or enticed from the time that they are small infants, that they are taught to want many things that they were deliberately made difficult for them to obtain. And after being encouraged to want certain things, they are then denied the means of acquiring them without robbing, stealing, and or killing to get them. Right? And last, there are many instances very deceptively encouraged to want many things that are of no constructive value, and that there are no no constructive value, and that they do not need these things, and that no person can use them in a manner that is generally considered to be acceptable. So we have to give this a little bit more thought process here in regards to what it is that we want to go ahead and focus on, right? If we're looking once again to replace racism, white supremacy with justice, stealing cannot be one of those things when simply stealing helps to go ahead and increase injustice. I want to take this time here to mention one of his students, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, who met Dr. Fuller, Neely Fuller, that is, during I would call it a Black Power meeting, right? And how his presence in the meeting, and how when he went ahead and described, of course, this system of racism, right? And how at that time nobody else said the things that he said in the manner that he did, by means, of course, prompted her to go ahead and be his understudy. Let's go to the first video for Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, please.
Now I want to repeat after me. Racism is a system. Now I consider this gentleman one of the most profound thinkers of any color in the 20th century. Remember, we started the 20th century with our great sociologist, historian, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. And Dr. Du Bois told us in his book, Souls of Black Folks, in 1903, that the problem of the 20th century is the question of the color line between the lighter and darker races of mankind. And then mid-century, Neely Fuller Jr. came along with his book, and I hope that everybody will get his book who doesn't have a copy. His phone number is 202-484-5461. But it is a profound statement, analysis of looking at racism as a total system structure that functions in all areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and...
That was the great matriarch, the late Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Once again, if you haven't picked up her book, ISIS Papers, it's a wonderful read. It helps us to go ahead and understand this white supremacy, racism, with her being, of course, a psychologist. And her work is monumental. And for her to take up this work and become the understudy of Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. and want to go ahead and ensure that we, as an African, living in the diaspora, have this rich and human experience, this thing we call life, right? So our hats go off to her. Our hats go off to, of course, to Neely Fuller Jr. for the work that they continue to do. We salute you, definitely. So just to recap where we're at now. Number one, stop snitching. And once again, stop snitching does mean that you have every right to go ahead and defend yourself from unjust acts. Number two, stop name calling. I think that's pretty self-explanatory there. Stop cursing. As we used in the example earlier, that of course sometimes we get fixated on, of course, the use of the profane language as opposed to, of course, the actual argument itself. By means, let's take a step back when we're having these type of conversations. Number four, stop gossiping. If you're not willing to go ahead and say what it is that you want to say behind a person's back to a person's face, don't bother. Don't bother. Don't bother at all. Once again, if you do it behind their back, it oftentimes leads to, of course, promoting injustice. And by means, since our focal point is to go ahead and eliminate white supremacy, racism, and more importantly, of course, have better interactions with ourselves, our family, and strangers, basically, don't do it. Easier said than done, I know. Number five, stop being discourteous. The working definition for this: if in fact you find yourself on the other end where you're not able to go ahead and convey what it is that you would like to say when you're in a heated argument, then the other person is being discourteous. And by means, there's no promotion of justice when that does take place. Next, our last one here, just before we hit the break, stop stealing, right? Stop stealing. It's interesting. Especially when he goes on to say that even if you are stealing for survival, it's still promoting injustice. I'm sure we can come up with a whole bunch of arguments on both sides of the fence to go ahead and support the action. However, though, our focal point, once again, is to go ahead and help eliminate white supremacy, racism. This is not going to help if we continue to go ahead and act in this manner. We got a few seconds here before we head and jump into the break. We're going to go into, of course, the last 4 out of the 10. I'm Dave Rankin. This is here to help you. Join me after the break.
Think you have what it takes to bring value to the community? The TCN TV network is expanding and now accepting TV show proposals. Here's an opportunity to build celebrity status and become part of an elite group of community advocates that are focused on building, strengthening, and empowering our community in a positive way. Are you interested in embarking on a new adventure? TCN TV is searching for people interested in opportunities to change the conversation and pave an unforgettable legacy. If you feel you have something of value to offer, send a written show proposal to shows@mytcntv.com.
Are you retiring smart? Make your home's equity work for you. With your home's equity and our 30 years of experience, the Retire Smart Properties team can help you achieve the quality of life you've always wanted. Our services are 360 degrees. We'll give you advice, take care of staging and selling, and help you find the perfect home and community to transition to. It's time to enjoy the retirement lifestyle you deserve. Visit our website today to learn how you can use your home to retire comfortably. The Retire Smart Properties team, powered by RE/MAX West.
Welcome back, family. Thank you very much for once again tuning in to this week's edition of Here to Help You. I'm by myself. I don't have my lovely, lovely co-host with me. So hopefully, for those who stuck around this far, we appreciate it so much. If in case you're just joining us right now, we are talking Neely Fuller Jr. and his book, The United Independent Compensatory Code, System, and Concept. It's a textbook or workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, white supremacy. For those who have not read this book, it can be a little bit tedious in reading. There's no flashiness to it. It's very cut. It's very dry. And reason being, of course, once again, the focal point in eliminating white supremacy, racism, we need to become more focused on regards to, of course, the objectives that we're looking to go ahead and execute, for lack of better terms, right? And by means, this book, it helps. It definitely helps. His second book, the Word Guide, like I said, it's not shipped to Canada. We need you guys, our brothers and sisters in the States, we need you guys to go ahead and ensure that the materials that you guys have to yourselves over there and simply cannot get across here as of yet, we need you guys to go ahead and assist in that process. Our family over here need the information. You see it up there in the top left-hand corner. But yeah, we need the information that we can go ahead and help our own. We can build strong families, build better nations, and more importantly, become better people at it as well. Manisha, I believe we had a question, yes, from somebody who tuned in, yes? Perfect. Let's see if we can go ahead and read this question. So the question from Hot Girl, it states here, why the government is so keen on changing only the sex education curriculum and not the whole curriculum? What are they trying to cover up? Programs they removed which kids had before to help? It's an interesting question. As she continues on to state here, kids into the world, or help kids into the world to put in sex ed and only sex ed. Why not change what we are taught in school and about our history and ancestors? It's a very interesting question. I'm going to work my way backwards in answering this. Number one, with respect to, of course, including our history in the curriculum. I'm from the school of thought where we, as Africans here in the diaspora, we need to go ahead and take better care in teaching our history, right? There's some who may believe or may think that if we've done it ourselves, then by means, of course, we've let them off the hook by not including us in the curriculum. Yes, we've contributed so much to this nation of ours, right? And yes, of course, we should be recognized for it. But at the same time, if you're looking at the animal kingdom, bears don't go ahead and send their cubs off to tigers to be trained, right? And of course, lions don't go ahead and send their cubs off to the gorillas to be trained as well. So by means, we're the only people to go ahead and send our offspring off to be taught by other cultures, right? And then we ask questions such as the one, of course, a hot girl asked, and simply in regards to, of course, why didn't they go ahead and include our curriculum, right? Half of it has to do with, of course, us not making enough of a strong voice. I believe that, of course, once we have more than just pockets of resistance in regarding to, of course, the curriculum, then by means, of course, they will go ahead and look at including us just a little bit more, bringing us to the forefront, right? And by means, I mean, there have been some revisions. We've had Rainford Cornish, who is a high school teacher here in Brampton, Peel District, who has went ahead, and sat on the board to go ahead and revise the curriculum to have African Canadian history now be included, right? Whether it be sections, parts, or simply, throughout the whole year as an actual course. So, I mean, there are baby steps, and by means, looking at our demographics as well. I mean, it's hard, especially being a small demographic in the city, let alone this nation, to be included. But by means, we just got to stay the course, and hopefully, more of us will go ahead and take on the challenge. To answer your first part of the question there regarding the sex ed, this is, wow. It's a tough question to answer, especially in regards to now promoting justice, right? They felt before, of course, with respect to the curriculum which they had before, did not so much go ahead and promote the justice that our children needed, and so it's a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to go have everybody go back to a curriculum where simply seems outdated, but at the same time, I mean, there's no balance. I don't think there have been any constructive conversations, with respect to other, teachers, to faculty members, with respect to, of course, to implementing a new curriculum which strikes balance or strikes the justice which is needed. But it's still a work in progress. And by means, hot girl, by means, we thank you very much for the question. And if not for yourself, I'm sure there are so many other people in the city, let alone across the province, who have the same question. And hopefully, we did a little bit of justice towards that question today. So, getting back to, of course, our subject at hand, Neely Fuller, the top 10 basic stops that every victim of white supremacy should practice in speech and or action. We left off at stealing. Our number 7 here today is stop robbing. I know people are probably thinking that what is the difference between stealing and as well as robbing? However, though, here's our definition. So stop robbing is to use direct bodily harm and or to use the threat of direct bodily harm to take from a person any one or more things that he or she possesses. So simply, to steal, of course, no bodily harm. To rob, either the threat of or simply the use of bodily harm, right? Next, he goes on to say that robbing is to take something from that person with that person, knowing one or more of the following at the exact same time of the taking. These are interesting questions here to go ahead and ponder, but here they are. What was taken? When it was taken? Where it was taken? How it was taken? Why it was taken? And by means, who took it? It's interesting, once again, how he goes ahead and puts, of course, the 5 W's and the H in there in regards to promoting justice, in this case for stop robbing. He continues on to state here that a person who robs has the basic intention as a person who steals. Neither robbing nor stealing helps to promote justice. A person should not rob for the same reasons that he or she should not steal. So if you are taking something out of survival, once again, as stated earlier in today's program, it does not help to go ahead and promote justice. In fact, it only increases the realm of injustice, and simply, it doesn't help. Next, stop fighting, which is pretty self-explanatory, but we'll go ahead and put it in here. People should not fight as long as they can talk to each other, and they should talk to each other in a manner as to minimize the conflict and or to promote justice. Very simple words to go ahead and live by. But once again, when we are looking at being in a situation where emotions tend to take over, it is definitely difficult to go ahead and put those emotions aside and to use logic to go ahead now and to have a more considerable outcome, right? It's tough, it's difficult. However, though, once again, to have a better experience, to have better interactions, and more importantly, as a focal point to eliminate or replace racism, white supremacy with justice, these things need to be considered. Neely Fuller continues on to state here regarding stop fighting. When people cannot talk to each other without trying to maim or to do bodily harm to each other, they should do everything they can to minimize or eliminate contact with each other. That is so difficult to do. Could you imagine, of course, being in an argument and simply, you know what? You want to go ahead and separate yourself from this person. How hard it would be to go ahead and separate yourself from this person, especially if you have not got your last word in, or simply, you know what, your due justice or your due diligence in expressing yourself. It's difficult, very difficult, my friends. You can see this state here, there is no justifiable violence. There's only justifiable counter-violence. The definition for counter-violence is as following: to protect yourselves or themselves or others from acts of deliberate, immediate, direct, and functionally unavoidable violence by any persons. So once again, this means you have every right to defend yourself. Be careful with the instigation, because of course that does not go ahead to promote the justice we are seeking. However, though, if someone throws a punch, you have every right to go ahead and use your ninjutsu skills or your, street combat, your hand-to-hand combat to its full functionality. Next, stop killing. This is a tough one, especially, of course, when it comes to the psychosocial issues that we face in our society. Our inner city communities. The gun violence. I mean, it's plagued our city. We've known way too many people who've died as a result of gun violence. Let alone, of course, the terrorist acts which have been taking place and have been happening in the city. Two of them, by the way, which media has not went ahead and let alone the powers that be, the premier, nor the prime minister, the mayor, have used the word terrorist in the two acts which have taken place this summer, or spring and summer. So stop killing. The definition: even in direct or immediate defense defense of self or others, or in the direct protection of major property, it is best to avoid killing or maiming. So if somebody who kicks in the door, who is unwanted, by means, I understand, of course, to protect your rights, to stand your ground and all that. But of course, if you are going to go ahead, right, and let off a shot in this person, if we are looking to go ahead and actually promote justice, we may want to go ahead and think twice, as opposed to, of course, pulling that trigger. You may want to go ahead and hold them at bay till, of course, the rightful authorities come by and make a justifiable arrest. Next, Neely Fuller continues on to state here: killing any aggressor should only be done where there is apparently no other known way to put an immediate stop to his or her aggression, and or when every reasonable effort has been made to escape the immediate fury of the aggression. So if you're unable to go ahead and separate yourself from the situation, and simply this person continues to cross the line or cross that boundary or in your personal space, and by means it attempts to inflict bodily harm, you have every right to go ahead and defend yourself. But once again, please use logic. Use the logic as opposed to, of course, that emotional side of things, which we all know is a tough thing to do. And last on our list, stop squabbling among yourselves and asking racist or white supremacy to settle it. The working definition here is to establish situations that cause and or encourage non-white people to squabble among themselves. The racists or white supremacists, they approve of and encourage non-white people to fight each other, kill each other, or do anything best to help non-white people to remain confused and non-constructive. So by means, this is something that we have to do. Our focal point, especially for today, is to assist our members of our society to become better, to have better interactions, especially with respect to eliminating racism. We have to do our best to incorporate these 10 things. And these 10 things are, once again, number 1, stop snitching. Number 2, stop name calling. Number 3, stop cursing. Number 4, stop gossiping. Number 5, stop being discourteous. Number 6, stop stealing. Number 7, stop robbing. Number 8, stop fighting. Number 9, stop killing. And the last on the list, stop squabbling among yourselves and asking the powers that be, in this case, the racist white supremacists, to go ahead and settle it on our behalf. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your tenacity. We also thank, of course, any questions, comments. We are encouraging any comments on today's program. Please go ahead and leave them. There's only we can go ahead and grow. I am Dave Rankin. Next week, you will definitely see myself alongside the Donette Simone Jennifer Smith. She'll definitely be here. We're signing off. This is here to help you. We appreciate it very much for tuning in today. Peace and love, family. One love.